Okay, good evening everybody. Welcome to the Regeneration and Housing Scrutiny Review Board. Tonight I'm going to start off by saying welcome everybody, and I mean that. I mean the members of the public who are listening, officers and councillors. Welcome to everybody really, and I hope to have quite an open meeting and discuss as much as we can without any restrictions where possible. Okay, first of all, apologies. Do we have any apologies?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay, thank you. Late items to be introduced by the chair. To my knowledge, there are none.
No.
So therefore, we can move on. Declarations of interest, item 3. Do we have any declarations of interest? No? Okay, thank you. So item number 4. The minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of October 2020. I'll go through if anybody's got anything, comments to make on these minutes. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. Okay. Anybody who was present at that meeting, would they like to propose those minutes, and anybody else, would they like to second them? Any of the councillors?
I'll propose, John.
Thank you,
sorry,
Jerry.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Chair.
It's okay. It's fine. Anybody can anybody second those? Any other councillors second those minutes? I wasn't present, so I'm not in a position to do that.
I'll second them.
Right. Thank you. Okay, move on then. Item 5, residential permit parking in Derby, and I believe it's Nigel Bryan who's going to go through this item for us. Over to you, Nigel.
Good evening. I was just checking the tech was working then.
Okay.
Right. Okay, we're on.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, residential parking permit system in Derby has been around now in one form or another, for around about 20 years. We were very tentative. I was working here at the time. We were quite tentative about the way we approach this. There are different models around the country, but that's sort of distilled over time, so that most people are operating very similar schemes now. There's a few odd ones particularly in London, in some of the London boroughs, but most of them are very similar. In January 2019, we came to this scrutiny session with particularly to answer questions about how the schemes worked, why they were implemented, and discussions about some of the operational issues that had been reported to councillors and been reported by customers direct to the service. And also we were just beginning to launch e-permits. We'd rolled them out again on a rolling basis from the previous autumn, so from autumn 2018, and we were rolling them through 2019. We had a fairly healthy discussion about some of the issues and about how the virtual permits, the electronic permits, would help customers, particularly with managing schemes for themselves.
Chair. Sorry, yeah. Nigel, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. There's just a problem with your mic. We're just kind of struggling to hear you.
Okay, sorry.
I'm clearly no tech expert. Oh, that may have been better.
Yeah.
I just unplugged it and pushed it back in again quickly.
Oh, no, it's still bad, Nigel. Sorry.
Let's give it another go.
Lindsay's put a helpful suggestion. I don't know if that works, but...
Try switching your video off. Thank you, Councillor Russell. I was about to interject.
I really couldn't.
Thank you. It's okay. It's fine. Thank you. It's just a buzzing noise. It was difficult to pick the words out.
Any better?
Much better.
Okay, right. Sorry about that. It was just a case of restarting, unplugging, and plugging back in again. So I'll just wind back a little bit in case some of that was a bit scrambled. I was saying that we came in January 2019 really to look at how the schemes worked, why the schemes are implemented in residential parking, and discuss some of the operational issues that have been reported to councillors and to the service. But also, we were just in the process of going forward with launching the virtual permits, the electronic permits, and we were really at that time hoping that the electronic permits would be really useful for customers, because instead of having to go through an old-fashioned paper-based administrative system where they ring up or visit the council house to get a book of permits, etc., they'll be able to self-service online. We could introduce more flexibility in some areas around visitors, which would help with carers, help with when people are having building work done, and those sorts of issues. And it's in the report, which is quite a comprehensive report actually on what there is of residence parking. But the advantages are in 4.6, and this greater flexibility has been a real success. There are about 4,000 people approximately who live within areas of residence parking schemes. 70% of people took up the scheme very, very quickly. That is continuing to rise. We do give incentives for people to do that because there's a cost saving to the council. Approximately in terms of paper and postage, it's about £40,000 a year. But that's realised from that 70%. So moving more and more people just increases that. But it's more the customer interaction, that we're actually not reliant on people contacting us, asking for permission, getting our approval to do things. People can self-manage within an online portal, and that seems to work really well. And we've had real good feedback saying how popular it is. To come as no surprise, we're seen as a beacon, like we are in lots of parking things. We're seen as a beacon by the British Parking Association for the way that we do it, and for some of the sensitivities that we've built in. Visitor permits, as I said before, that was always a bone of contention. Well, now we can be much more flexible about that, and we can tailor the scheme. So it's not one scheme for everybody, we can actually tailor schemes. And the key thing about residence parking and whatever schemes we put in place is that they are always context-based. So in some areas it's a single street, in other areas it's a group of streets. It all depends on the local pressures. What creates the demand? Is it because places are near to the hospital, or are they near a school or near the university? So the patterns of demand can all be tailored differently, and that was true in the old schemes. But with the virtual permits, we're able to build in a bit more flexibility and actually monitor what's used, how it's used. We get better data from these things, so we can work with residents to blend the schemes differently. If a particular area has got a particular pattern, then we can try and work with the residents to see if we can change the scheme or change the way that permits are used. It does give us a better chance to have a look at fraudulent activity as well. To the benefit of the residents. We've always, like most schemes around the country, suffered from people who can legitimately buy a book of tickets for visitors because they live on a street, but then they sell them to people as commuter parking. We've got a much better angle now in terms of the data to see about how we can sort of counter that. I will admit to you that we've been very, very sensitive, particularly during 2020, with everything else that's been happening, not to be very harsh in terms of how we've dealt with abuses of residence parking. We are aware that people have had care needs, people have been taking home deliveries, there's been food parcel distribution, food bank activities, etc. So we've been very conscious to incorporate that where we can help, use the schemes to be helpful, but also we haven't been very aggressive. It's also worth noting that a lot of the parking team have been out doing GP hot tubs, working on the development of vaccination stations and doing other COVID and NHS supporting activities. We've been able to use the scheme to support activities during 2020, particularly around the hospital. We were able to identify where there was capacity and change some residence parking into NHS parking because there was more staff going to the hospital, particularly in March and April last year, to support the response. So we were able to generate parking on street near the hospital. absolutely open and informed residents of that, and of course most people are absolutely supportive of the fact that we're in a national emergency situation. But we can do that for some employers. So the post office also had an upshift in postal workers coming to the depot in Derby. So we were able again to change some of our pay and display parking into basically almost like virtual residence parking. All kinds of wonderful things we can do now that we've got an electronic system. We're not paper-based. We're not dependent on that kind of chain of communication. It's much faster now and much more data-driven. I mean, that's basically how the schemes work. I mean, obviously, we think that they work quite well. We think we've modernised them. We think we're leading the way in terms of some of the ways that we do this. Certainly for unitary authorities, say British Parking Association call on our expertise quite a lot. Lots of other local authorities will come to see how we do it in Derby, and a lots of our materials and our communication materials with residents are the model basis really for many other unitaries around the country, where they'll take ours and put their logo on it, and in some cases the British Parking Association will actually send our information out with packs saying this is how they do it in Derby, why don't you just copy it. I'm quite happy to take any questions if anybody's got any questions about how schemes work, how we get them into operation. But say the big update from this was virtual permits. I think we're convinced that it's successful, and it's an area where I think we'll continue to develop.
Thank you very much, Nigel. I have a few questions, but I'd ask if any other councillors have questions first. No? Okay. Relating to the My Permit, I believe there's a 10p charge when you use the My Permit. We've had a slight issue in Ulverston, Will Morton, relating to it. So really it's just saying going forward, I know there'll be teething trouble with anything as it's developed. Hopefully that'll be transparent, because the convenience of using the My Permit, the benefits by far outweigh the paper system. I understand that. Yeah. So, but am I right in saying that there's this 10p charge?
There is, and you're right to use the word convenience. It is a convenience charge, and that is what the My Permit operator takes as that's their only fee.
And sorry, go on.
Go on. No, I was just going to say that's their only fee, and it's kind of offset against, well, first of all, it's convenience charge, but if you imagine that you had to make a phone call or visit the council house, I mean, it's a marginal sum compared to the cost of doing those activities. Yeah.
My next question then, so the My system, like we have the payrolls on My, is that a private corporate entity, or is it within a council or government control? I don't know.
My Permit is
about the background of My MI.
My Permit is different from the council's payroll My People system. It's just coincidence that it's called that.
Okay.
But they are a completely separate third-party entity that we have a contract with. But as much as we have a contract, we are very much a development partner of theirs. So if you look at the way that we've extended the scheme into operating with the waste site, we asked them if that was possible to do, to try and work with the capacity of the waste site during restrictions, etc. And we were really the test bed for that. We gave them the ideas. They worked till 10 days from having the initial thought to having it live. The whole of Wales now operates on that system.
Wow. Okay, my next question then, relating to that also, if it is separate, is the measures in place so that they can't increase this 10p charge? So if it's got to only be a nominal increase, a peppercorn increase or something like that?
It's a contractual rate. We're not seeing any ambition for them to increase that. In essence, what's basically happening is that the scope of and usage of the system is growing, so it's not just for virtual permits. You can pay on street instead of using a pay and display machine, etc. As those activities increase, they're getting more multiples of 10p. So yeah. And I think the relationship we're having with them in Derby, particularly, like I say, very close in terms of how we're helping them to grow and develop their business, expand the system into new areas, and we're quite keen to test it here and try it here. I think we get this with some other suppliers where they'll actually hold their rates for us because we're helping them to develop their business.
Very good. Okay, and then my last question, really, I suppose it's self-explanatory, but parking permits, which you mentioned, does encourage people then to park in the surrounding areas, which then can cause problems there. But I suppose if you look at any area as a circle and then you expand out, the area increases. So there is more area once you go outside the permit area, if that makes sense.
No, it does, and it's always the element that's really difficult about looking at residence parking. And sometimes we will get a request through a neighbourhood board or whatever channel to examine residence parking for a street, and it's quite clear that actually it's a group of streets that needs to be treated, because if you do it in one, you just get displacement. Yeah. And you can't just chase displacement, so it's always a bit of a difficult process is designing a scheme and coming up with a logical range of streets. And then, of course, we have never imposed residence parking on any community. So there's basically a consultation exercise, and there's almost like a local vote on it. And the way it works is that 51% of households in an area have to be in favour of it. So if you like, there has to be a 51% return, and 51% of people have to be in favour of it. So it's not a straight, if only 4 people reply and 3 of them are in favour and there's a street of 100, that's not going to meet the threshold. And we measure the number of households using the postcode data as the baseline. So we use the post office postcode data that establishes how many households there are. So if there are 100 households in a street, 51 of them have to vote for it. So there is a threshold factor, because actually it's quite a powerful thing to do in a street, because it doesn't only maybe cost you after the first year, because generally we do it free for the first year and then work with the residents to review it after 11 months. But so it doesn't only necessarily cost you in future years, but it's a restriction on your use as well. But it's also a restriction on your visitors. So it's actually quite a powerful thing to do. It is very often a very, very quick solution. They're implemented and issues go away very quickly. But there is, the residents have to realise that, they live them within those restrictions, which is why having as much flexibility as we can and being able to personalise it through the virtual permits is a real win.
Yeah, very good. Very enlightening. Thank you. No questions, any other councillor? No? Okay, thank you, Nigel.
Just one question, please. Sure, I'm sorry, Councillor Crystal.
Okay, Ross.
So the paper-based permits, they were charged at 20p, if I recall. Is that correct? So by digitising it, we're actually saving folks money?
Yes, that's true. Actually, I'd forgotten that was the case. That we do so few paper-based permits now that I'd actually forgotten that there is that benefit for the user.
Thank you. Thanks, Nigel.
Yeah, good point, Ross. Thank you. All right, can we move on then to item 6? A52 Wyvern Transport Improvement Scheme, update on delivery and lessons learned.
If I could,
take it away.
if I could just, no, it's all right. If I could just introduce it, Chair. Thank you. To come along and provide the update. I just want to introduce Lincoln Smith as our head of engineering, and Phil Massey, our fantastic structural engineer, who's been the project manager for the A52 since the pause in the project in 2019. And I guess I just wanted to say that pause in the project, well, the reasons for that are very well documented and subject to considerable scrutiny already. Including that very detailed audit report. So Lincoln and Phil are involved in the project from that point, and they'll take you through the progress to date. And it's an exciting time because we're moving to the workforce being off-site next month. So it feels like it's a real timely progress report for you. And it certainly hasn't been without its challenge since 2019 as well, like most infrastructure schemes, especially big ones like this. But I think we can confidently say that's been successfully delivered. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate that you wanted to look at the lessons learned, and just to say that we'll be very pleased to come back once we've been through that process, but we're only just really kicking that off now and talking to everyone involved. And once we've gone through the analysis of what we've found, very happy to come back and talk to you about that. But I'll happily hand over to Lincoln and Phil.
Thank you, Werner.
Great, thanks, Werner. Phil, are you okay? We've got a double act, I'm afraid, for the presentation. Phil, as the project manager, will be taking you through the delivery and some of the practical issues on site and the timescales, etc., whilst I'll take you through some of the lessons learned later on, if that's okay.
It's fine. Fine, thank you, Lincoln.
Right. So are
you screen sharing, Phil?
If this works, yeah, that's the.
Yes, it's working, Phil.
Okay, except it's not working quite in the right way. Just bear with me, sorry. Just bear with a sec. All right, if I. It's always the way with technology. I do apologise.
Yeah, if we're all sitting in a room round a table now, we could do it with the the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, just bear with me a second. Oh, no, it won't let me screen share. Let's try one more time. Otherwise, I will just have to talk.
Can Dominic look at this for us? And we could always delay the item and move on and then come back to item 6. Okay. Okay. Does he need presenter rights as well, Phil? He's got presenter rights.
He's got presenter rights, yes.
Typical.
What is it you're trying to share? Is it a PowerPoint?
It was just a PowerPoint, yeah.
Do you want to try and email it through and we'll see if we can pick it up?
Yeah, if you bear with me. But while I do that, I can actually... it's really... excuse me. Anyway, my emails have just decided to crash now. Apologies for that. What I can do is talk through it. There wasn't really very much there anyway. What we have got is, if Lincoln's IT is working better than mine, then we've got a short time-lapse video to show, which runs from the demolition of the bridge to the opening of the new bridge. And it kind of runs through the scheme on that. So I think just to follow on from what Werner said, Lincoln and I really came onto the project when the previous project manager left in around, it was April 18. And it was shortly thereafter that through April and May, it became quite apparent, and I think as we all know as a matter of record, that things were not, in terms of the design and in terms of the budget, both were, the design hadn't been finished. I think there were some thoughts that the design would be finished as the scheme progressed on site and they could be dealt with, and it became apparent that the budget wasn't sufficient either due to some of the decisions and some of the complications in actually delivering the scheme, which led to then the audit report being requested in May 2018. So from that point forward, really, the works themselves had started on site in October, November 17, and they continued whilst we were doing redesign work through, say, from sort of April, May 18 through to January 19. Works continued until such point as we run out of deliverable work I think that's it's a matter of record really. And then from that point onwards, we had a couple of months where we were just finally developing a programme, a more robust design solution, and obviously a budget to go with that, which was then presented to Cabinet in April 19, whereon we got the revised budget and programme dates, which was the overall budget of 43.2 million and sort of an October 2020 delivery date for the scheme. Straight after that, right at the end of April 19, we restarted work on earnest, which was then with the demolition of Meadow Lane footbridge, and the works have carried on continually since that point. We've put in new slip roads, we've done an extra lane on the A52, we've improved the roundabouts of both the Dirt Parade roundabout by Costco and Toys R Us, as was, and also at the other end of Wyvern Way on Stanley Way. Wyvern Way itself has been considerably widened, from 2 very narrow lanes to a 4-lane carriageway, which has opened up 2 routes from both Stanley Way and at Pullman Road into the new development site at the Derby Triangle site, which has opened up 23 hectares of development land, and currently with the current planning application, the potential for 1,335 jobs potentially as that site gets developed over the coming years. We've also done the footbridge. I think that's the very easy marker point of the scheme that has carried through this year, particularly December 19. We started to get the main pieces of that on site. That was then erected on site, lifted into place during the first COVID lockdown in May 2020. And then works continued through the summer to get the approach ramps done and various other elements of the scheme finished. And all the TM, all the traffic management was removed, and the footbridge was opened at the end of October 2020, as we said. And at that point, all the new facilities that we've put into place and constructed through the scheme were in use, which is why we're saying that's really substantial completion of the scheme. The public were able to use all the facilities, the new bridge, all the new roads, take advantage of everything that went in place. We've subsequently been doing some small amount of work which are on sort of public realm improvements largely, and a lot of planting, tidying up of the works and those sort of things, which, all things being equal, and the weather forecast this week might frustrate us a little bit as that's been developing today, but we are looking for that to be finished by mid-February, which we should be completely done and away from site, job completely finished. So that's where we are. Just as some sort of headline figures, and I will send the presentation around afterwards should anybody want it, but we've either reconstructed or built 57,000 square metres of carriageway as part of the scheme. We've put in 28 new controlled crossing facilities at junctions. There's just over 4,000 square metres of shared use footway and cycleway that's gone in. We've improved the drainage in the area such that 55,000 square metres of carriageway and highway land is now sent through treated drainage systems, sustainable drainage. We've buried just under 1,400 cubic metres of attenuation tanks to deal with rainwater storage and reduce the likelihood of flooding in the area. There's 832 square metres of wetland habitat that we've managed to build into the scheme, and we've, on the A52 itself, we've put in 1,200 linear metres of new concrete barrier along the Central Reserve, as well as, and that includes all the areas where we've widened Wyvern Way considerably, improved the access. I think if everybody remembers the access, particularly at, well, if you've ever been to Sainsbury's there, or you've been to the Boots junction at Pullman Road, they're all now signalised controlled junctions, so traffic can get in and out in both directions quite easily. And that facility is there on Wyvern Way, and to allow the development of the Network Rail land by St Modwyn's to start in earnest. So it's really unlocked the potential of that sort of really big area of land that was sat there between Wyvern Way and the river. So that's sort of in a nutshell, and apologies for not having a few slides to show that. the scheme itself. Some of the detail away from just the sort of big ticket item that everybody sees in terms of the footbridge itself. And if it works, we've got a small slideshow. If the chair would like to see it, it's about just over 2 minutes of a time-lapse video, if that's of any interest.
Yes, certainly, Phil. Please do.
Right, okay, I'll see if I can share that video footage then, fingers crossed.
Yeah. You see, the thing is about this works, we all drive along there and think, we can't see anything happening for months and months, but we don't know about the attenuation tanks for the flooding and things like that. There's an awful lot there that we don't see and people don't realise. And you know, a brief like this really does help, you know, so we can understand it more fully.
Right, has that come through, Chair?
I've got loading. It's loading now. Yes, it's coming through now.
Right, okay, it's got music with it and the music can be quite loud, so if you may want to turn down your headphone volume, but say it's 2 minutes 35, so I won't be able to hear you as it's playing, so I'll speak to you the other side.
Okay,
Hopefully
thank
it'll
you.
start playing. I hope everybody saw that.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Even Jerry at the end there.
Right, so I'll take over from this point. Thanks, Phil. Perhaps just one thing just to mention, Phil, obviously that bridge lift was done in obviously COVID restricted times, so social distancing, etc. So I think it's probably one of the key sort of things that everybody's very proud of, that we managed to get that bridge in, because that obviously could have been a significant delay. So working closely with the contractor in safe working processes meant that that structure managed to get brought in time, which was a great success. So if I share my screen again. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, it's just loading now, Lincoln. Yes, I can see it now.
Right, excellent. Right, well, I think as Phil said, obviously it's been a challenging project, and we won't sort of try and cover up the fact that obviously from where the project started from in its budget and its programme, things have been significantly delayed. And obviously because of that, there's an interest in to understand, you know, what were the issues that were sort of that made that happen. So I think Werner mentioned earlier on, if we read across sort of my bullet points going from left to right at the top, so there was an internal audit on the whole process when things were realised that the project wasn't in a good place. That was reported in January 19, and it did include some major concerns that were identified. On the back of that audit, there was a systems weakness report. That was issued in June 2019, and that had 53 recommendations about how the project and the council could perhaps improve its systems to make a more successful delivery of this and other projects. We've very recently, as Werner said, just had a workshop on a construction phase lessons learned. So that was bringing in the contractor and all the people, all the parties, organisations that were involved in the practical delivery of the project. That was obviously done virtually. It would have been great to get together. We would probably use Pride Park to get everybody around a table and various workout rooms, etc. But that wasn't possible, so we did it on a virtual basis. And so that was the project team feeding in their direct experience of what the project was like, some of the less tangible things that perhaps an audit maybe not picks up on, maybe about the interpersonal relationships with people, how you get maybe a one-team approach that might be seen as more would give you successful delivery. And then the bit that's outstanding that we've still got to do is a lessons learned on the element before construction. We're just getting an external facilitator to get engaged with that process, and fingers crossed that'll be carried out in February 21. And that'll look at the sort of the early case parts of the project, some of the business case elements that have been put forward, some of the procurement mechanisms, how we got the contract, all those aspects. Right. What I've done is I've reviewed the various elements that have been done to date. As Werner has said, they're out in the public domain anyway, certainly the audit report, but obviously it's very voluminous, 139 pages, and the system weakness, 53 recommendations. It's probably not the most effective use of time to go through every individual one here, so I've sort of summarised some of the key ones and some of the learning that as a project team we've experienced. So the most significant areas that is identified have been one around internal governance, so cost reporting and risk management wasn't effective in the early stages of the project, and perhaps as Vernon mentioned earlier, there was like a resetting of the project at one point when it was understood that the project was in a difficult position, and a lot of the issues that I'm highlighting here in the lessons learned have been implemented anyway to ensure the successful delivery of what you've just seen. So cost reporting and risk management wasn't effective. And with governance, obviously, escalation of issues to senior officers and members is a key area where decision making needs to understand what the issues are, and those mechanisms weren't in place to enable people to make effective decisions. And the board meetings that were being held weren't seen as effective in managing those issues and giving a steer to the project team. So moving on from internal governance, the resources, certainly a key thing which was obvious when we set up a new team to deliver. There was a lot more people brought into the project, but at the beginning of the project that wasn't the case. I think it was down to, as it says at the first point, an over-reliance on a single council officer for the delivery, and perhaps then an optimism, people hoping that things go well, and that the design solutions could be established to resolve the issues, but perhaps people were chasing an issue which was beyond the resource that was available to them. And adequate checks and balances on the design development. One of the areas that was fundamental, I think, in the successful delivery was the fact of bringing in some external assurance roles on a project of this scale. So we used a consultant who came and sat on board and also sat in the project meetings and project discussions, who was able to sort of identify areas where we could do things differently, or give board some reassurance that, yep, that's been done in an appropriate way to save going back over similar issues that were earlier on in the project. The finances, obviously, that was in the report that I circulated beforehand, which obviously we set off from about 14.9, and as Phil mentioned, we ended up at 43.2. So there's obviously inadequate financial risk allowance allocated to the project. When we reset the project, we got £2.9 million worth of risk associated there to deal with issues as on infrastructure projects will always come to the fore. Obviously, within this project, early doors, there were a lot more than people were aware of, but even in the later delivery, there's still risks that have to be managed, and construction projects are always difficult to give a definitive budget for, so having an appropriate allowance is key. Obviously, there's the money that we need to deliver the project, and there was a desire to go for external funding to support the project, and there's pressure to go for that money, so we didn't lose the opportunity to deliver the infrastructure project. And this is probably one of the areas that we'll be touching on in the lessons learned for the pre-construction phase that I spoke about earlier on, looking in a bit more detail about what was the development of the business case. What did we know? Were we in the right place to actually go for the bid at that time? Another key thing was the design maturity and change coordination. Maturity of the design wasn't sufficient at the point of contract award, which probably means, well, it does mean that the design should have been more developed and understood, and therefore the contractor would have been in a better place to price it, being certain of what it was we wanted to deliver. There was significant changes on this project that meant that we kept chasing the cost. So the roundabout that we've got in at the moment, that's near Burger King or Costco, that was going to be a signal control junction, but actually there was benefits of making a roundabout, but we actually tendered as it being a signal controlled crossroads. So obviously those changes when you're in contract building something on site cost a lot more than if you just do it in the design office and don't build anything. Now, I think there actually are benefits in what we've got. I think we've got a better solution. However, it would be more efficient to have done that in the design office rather than when you're on site. And another element that was highlighted in the audit was that when changes were needed and issues arose, the design was perhaps reviewed in isolation. How do we deal with this one issue without looking at the knock-on impact that could have on other elements? So the drainage that Phil's mentioned, would the drainage still work that way if we change this design? So that, again, that design assurance role is a good way of capturing that for future projects. This was really close to my heart, that one team approach. Part of good or best practice in the construction industry is to get early contractor involvement. If you bring a contractor on board early in a project, they can bring their understanding of building things to a design, and then you have an effective discussion before you start the physical works. I think everybody would appreciate that the ECI on this project wasn't effective. Even though a contractor was brought on board, we didn't engage effectively with each other to understand the overall project objectives, what risks were there, how we can best manage those together. And because of that, the second bullet point, relationships can become strained then, because everybody's obviously under the spotlight. It's not going well. Everybody's issues, they're focused on their own problem to try and get resolved. Whereas if you can get a one-team approach in the early part of the project, like we did when we sort of reset, it wasn't sort of plain sailing from day one, but by the time we got to completion of the project, we'd got a really effective team. That would have been great if we could have that at day one of the project, so we can work more effectively in sort of highlighting risks to each other and helping each other resolve them. I mentioned that there's the systems weakness report had 53 recommendations. Just as an aside, of those 53 recommendations, 23 were seen as being significant, 27 being of moderate risk, and only 3 of them being of low risk. So there's a lot of things in there that were seen as needed to be addressed. Like I said earlier, I probably haven't got time to run through 53 recommendations and what's been implemented since the report, but here's the ones that sort of stood out to me. Was it's a more effective governance with additional roles, design and financial assurance was set up from that, probably even before that 19th of April date, so that any decisions, risks were able to be understood by senior members and officers and make the right decision understanding the risk. And on the back of that, there was very frequent cabinet member briefings on where the project was, what the current risks were, where the finances were at any one point, and how we were eating into any contingency that was there. We brought in a lot of new resources in various roles, as myself and Phil being two of them, external resources for financial assurance and for design assurance, and also just more capacity to the design team, and the contractor brought in additional and different people in there to try and sort of get that one team approach. And the construction management process to deliver a one-team approach. We use something called Lean, which I'm sure some people will have heard of, to actually challenge what it was that we were delivering and how we were delivering it. You know, were all the processes that we were doing, were they adding any value, or we were just doing the process because it's what's required? We were challenging the contractor's program to say, could we do it faster? Is there a way we can avoid taking so many weeks? You know, if we speed up, can we accelerate it? And all those sort of discussions were very helpful in what I would suggest ultimately was successful delivery of the project if viewed against the re-benchmarking of April 2019. So that's a summary of the lessons learned. But as Werner said, there are some more aspects that will be looked at on the pre-construction phase in February, which we can bring back at a later date.
All right, thank you, Lincoln. Councillors, does anybody have any questions or comments? No. Deadly silence tonight. Oh, yes. Who was that speaking? Sorry.
Sarah, hello.
Okay, Councillor Russell, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing the report tonight. It is welcome. We've wanted a report on the A52 for some time as a board to get a feel for where the project is and what lies ahead. I am reassured that we will be completing the project within the revised timescales and within the revised budget. That's very, very good news, and I'm very, very pleased about that.
So we.
From my perspective as a member, one of the most important things, aside from completing the project within the revised budget and time frame, is the meat of the lessons learned. We have to be assured as elected members that the council has understood fully what went wrong in the original project, which I appreciate that neither you, Lincoln, nor you, Philip, were involved in, but really understanding what went wrong and making sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, because we cannot have a situation like this arise again. Now, the details that you provided there, Lincoln, about some of the lessons learned aspects already is encouraging, and it's clear that there is work ongoing there. The question that I wanted to ask is, given that we're expecting the external facilitator to come in and do some work on the pre-construction phase with you guys, and kind of pull together everything in terms of a lessons learned approach overall, we expect that to be completed in February. Will we then produce a detailed report, taking into consideration everything that was put into the original report that was done by internal audit, alongside these other pieces of work, to be presented to the council, and in particular us as elected members? Because what I want to see is a fully detailed report highlighting all of these issues, each of the points in the internal governance document, explaining them and explaining whether they have been implemented, whether changes have been made to make sure that we don't repeat those mistakes, and how that actually works in practice. That is personally what I would like to see as a member of this board be brought back to us in March, so we have an opportunity as scrutineers to be able to adequately assess from our perspective whether we feel that work has been done, you know, to the standard that we would need it to be done to, because clearly we've got an important role in assessing that, and that's what I really want to see. So I'm looking for reassurance from you guys that will happen, and we will have that opportunity in March.
I suppose for me, March might be a bit of a challenge with that because those sessions will be in February, and obviously with everything we've got to set up from a virtual point of view. So I'd say March may be pushing us a little bit, Councillor Russell. But yes, we would expect to have a detailed lessons learnt report to bring back to not just you but to other members and our senior officers as well, who are seeking the same assurance that you are. It's important that we learn from this project as we do from all projects, and the project management that we have in-house. So I think our assurances are yes, that's very much our approach. We want to learn from this and we want to share that learning. I think you'll be pushing us for March, but we will ensure that the board are aware when we've got that detail and when we can come back to you. So we'll work closely with Karen to make sure it's in the diary.
Okay. You know I like to push for these things.
No, I know. I appreciate that.
It's a friendly challenge, but
yes,
I appreciate that work is still ongoing on it, but it is important that we have sight of that report and are able to adequately scrutinise it. So, Chair, if I can, I believe this is appropriate, but to just put a recommendation to the board to be agreed that as soon as it is available, we have on the agenda for this scrutiny board that fully detailed report into lessons learned on the A52, so we're able to adequately scrutinise it.
Certainly, Councillor Russell, I'm in total agreement with that. Do we need to put it to a vote? Does anybody object to this? No, nobody objects. It's good critical
I'm sorry,
work.
Chair, quickly. I certainly don't object to it because we've been waiting long enough for this to come to us. It was on the agenda for March last year and that meeting got cancelled, and then my understanding is it almost got dropped from this meeting. My concern is that March is the last meeting for this year's committee to meet, and having been on this committee several years, once the end of the year comes, it's a new committee, and the new committee get to set the work programme for the year. So I suppose I'm slightly concerned, particularly given as our fantastic Councillor Russell won't be on the council after May and won't be able to push for this to happen, that whoever is on this board makes sure that this does come back to this scrutiny board, because this is the biggest major project review that we've had, and this needs to be scrutinised, and I don't know what we can put in place to make sure that it is scrutinised by this board, but I feel very strongly that it must be. Thanks, Chair.
Agreed, Councillor West. There might be a solution here, or a partial solution. What if we say come back in March with a preliminary report, a précis, a summary? So to show us what they've got and without going into absolute minute detail.
Chair, could I just make a potentially contradictory suggestion?
Sure, go ahead.
I appreciate these things do take time, and I am, not wanting to push for this, but being as though I am serving my last remaining few months as a councillor, I would like to scrutinise this, if possible, in a formal process in the way that we do here, and if it's completed after our March meeting but before May, maybe we could have a extra special get-together of the Housing and Regeneration Board to scrutinise solely that item, because actually, if I'm honest, I think it probably warrants that. I think there will be a huge amount of stuff to go through, and I think members will probably have a number of questions based on any report that's produced, so possibly even having an additional meeting. Sorry everyone, I know that's never ideal, but I would quite like to be a part of it if I'm able. I mean, it may not be able, but
I'd support that, Chair.
Yeah, I support it as well, Councillor Russell.
Well, in that case, maybe I should revise my recommendation. Can I do that?
Sure. Go ahead. So we will have an extra and over meeting.
Karen, did you get that? What I said?
I did, yes. We'll put that in the resolution.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Next is Councillor Pearce.
Just a quick one, basically. We had an online meeting as Chaddesden councillors because the A52 more or less runs past where we are, to be quite honest, with Lincoln and Phil a couple of months ago. Excellent meeting. They did explain a lot of these bits and bobs with us. It was just a personal thanks on behalf of myself from the residents of Chaddesden for how well that the guys on site, the guys in the offices and everything have dealt with any query that we've thrown at them as councillors from Chaddesden, and also the residents as well. They've been absolutely fantastic. They've been detailing every breakdown of the works if they've been closed off, especially when the bridge went in as well. It was fantastic how they ran it. It was just a personal thanks from me to the guys on site and all the guys in the offices as well.
Yeah,
thank you. Pass that on. Yes. Thank you.
And any other questions? No more questions? All right. Thank you, Lincoln and Phil and Werner. That was very enlightening. And yes, it is a big thank you, really, from all of us here. We can see you've got a complete grasp on the situation, and hopefully the lessons learned are really learned. And it looks like we're truly on that path to the benefit of Derby, really. Thank you. Okay. Right. Shall we move on? Item 7. Locality working. And I believe Maria Murphy is going to be speaking on this issue.
I am. Thank
you. Take it away, Maria.
Thank you, Chair. That's been really interesting, reflecting back on the A52 project. And this is the complete opposite now on the next project, because this is kind of looking forward and learning the lessons that we've all learned so far from COVID, particularly around how we've responded to COVID in our localities. Now, I'm kind of ad-libbing here because I'm trying to open a presentation and share it with you. And I'm really nervous after what happened before. So come on, machine.
There's nothing coming through yet.
Oh, hold on a minute.
Is it?
It's uploading, it says. Let's just pray.
There we go.
I'm used to this going wrong.
It's loading now. It's not going wrong.
It's that good, you know. It'll be worth waiting for. Hooray.
Here we go. It's up.
My goodness me, I've achieved. That's a miracle. Right. I am here today, not on behalf of Derby Homes. I'm here on behalf of the new Team Derby that you're all going to be hearing lots about, because certainly the reason I think that Derby's been able to make such a great response to COVID is because of the teamwork and the partnership that we've had across all of our local authority sector, but equally, and if not more important, with our community and voluntary sector and also our residents. And I'm just going to take a bit of your time tonight to give you a flavour of how we believe that we can improve locality working in the future. So this is Maria now trying to move this screen on. Hooray.
Yep.
Right, the background then to how we've got to where we are. We all know that almost a year ago now, the council had to mobilise itself virtually overnight and create what we all came to know as Derby's Community Response Hub. What we put together was a front door through Derby Direct, and then multifaceted teams all working together with the community, and let's not forget hundreds of volunteers that came forward. And the amazing thing was, for me certainly, was that COVID became a shared problem. It wasn't the council's problem. It wasn't someone else's problem. We all took it on. And as we've reflected back, what we have definitely learnt is there's a lot of power when you bring communities together and all the agencies together. Now, I think those of you that have seen presentations by Rachel North will have seen this image before. And this is what we think customers must feel our services are like. I live in Derby. On occasion, I've had to access services through the council and Derby Homes, obviously. And even with a little bit of insider knowledge, it can still be very difficult knowing where to go, because over the years, I put myself in this bracket, but we collectively have made it very, very complicated for people to get where they need to be to get help. So spaghetti, although it tastes very nice, probably not how we want our services to be. We untangled the spaghetti, and I don't expect you to be able to read that slide, but that slide there is some service mapping that was done by some of my colleagues that are much, much better on doing structure charts than me. But that gives you a picture that you don't really want to spend much time trying to work your way through, but they are true structure charts of how services are delivered. And again, it's not exactly very user friendly. So we thought there's got to be a better way than spaghetti. So the COVID response model was built around the Community Information Hub, otherwise known as Community Action Derby. Now in Derby, I think we're blessed with the setup of community and voluntary organisations that we have. So it made absolute sense for them to be front and centre. Around that, the next circle out, we developed a network of local ward coordinators. Now that came together again very, very quickly, because it was the local area coordinators who at the time were best placed to step into that role. And then you can see the larger circles on the outside feeding in. We've obviously got Derby Direct, who are the council's service front door. We've got your good selves, elected members, and we've got the corporate leadership team of the council. We've got the stakeholders, as in the council and Derby Homes. And then in the bottom corner there, we've got the army of COVID volunteers, the people of Derby that came forward and said, I want to help and I can help. Now they've been there for a long time, those people, and they have been helping, but we've not always been aware of them. So the case for locality working, as we see it, is that community is strength-based, and working with the community is much more important than doing things to them, which is perhaps, excuse me, if we're honest, what we have done in the past. The term locality-based is exactly what it means. It means delivering services that are based in the community and reflect the differences between our communities. Now, as elected members, you all represent different areas of the city, and we all know all of those areas have got differing needs, differing problems, but different strengths as well. And it's about recognising that and delivering services that fit. One of the biggest things that I've learnt over the last 9-10 months is that we have broken down silos between departments and organisations that probably we would never ever have achieved had it not have been for the situation that we've all been in. And I hope that as elected members who must have got as frustrated as some of our residents, I'm hoping that you'll agree with me. We need to keep those silos broken down now, because it's a lot easier to actually identify the outcomes we need if people aren't fighting and being protective over their various areas. One thing I do want to stress to you tonight, and this is just an introduction, when you start to hear more about officers' proposals for better locality working, it is absolutely essential that the role of local councillors is bang in the middle of it. You are elected to represent our communities, our localities, our wards, whatever we want to call them. And I think the success of us all building on what we've done so far is going to rest on having councillors involved in it. Another big point that we've got is the retaining that simplified access point for citizens. It's worked. By funneling everything through one point, we have been it's been much easier for us to identify the gaps in provision. The next point that I want to make is it's another big change, a big change for all of us. We've all heard about outcome-focused performance. Well, we've got to stop talking it and do it. Because I think it's very, very important when you're looking at localities and communities that you've got to understand what outcome do we need for a community, or what outcome does the community want before we sit down and try and design a solution or a service. It's no good trying to shoehorn our traditional services across all communities. And the biggie at the bottom there is locality working moving forward has got to really and truly empower people. And that is empowering our people that work for us and empowering our residents, the citizens that live in Derby. Now, I guarantee you will hear a lot more about those phrases, and as I said, this is just an introduction. I guarantee as well, if you haven't seen this picture before, you will see this again in the future. And this is becoming quite a well-known graphic now. It's from a piece of work that was done that was trying to explain in the 21st century, what do we need a public servant to be able to do? And that kind of spells it out. It's not anymore about doing everything for the person or doing it all for the community, but it is about enabling it. And you would hear some of my colleagues talk about it being our job to provide the playing pitch, but then to let other people play on it. And that's a pretty brave and bold move that I'm hoping you will see the benefits of as we move forward. Now, our teams have got some challenges. We have to talk to teams. We've got a culture that we've got to change. Because for a long, long time, Derby is not alone, but local authorities everywhere have had paternal relationships with their citizens, and we have to end that. We also have to stop looking backwards and justifying that things are done like that, because we've always done it like that. I think the last 9 months has shown us all that, you know what, maybe the old ways of doing things weren't always the best. Maybe it was just comfortable for us. Mentioned outcome-based before. But the next one is important as well. Change is going to mean that we need to accept that we're not necessarily always doing the right thing. And I think a key point, and I'm sure as councillors, you all know that kind of what we do isn't always necessarily the right thing, because you get the inquiries that prove it. But we've got to just take that change and work with people rather than for, or dare I say it, against them. My shoulders are broad. I've been around a long time, and I know there are examples of where it would appear that we've worked against communities, and maybe there was good reason for it at the time, but I think the world has changed. We do absolutely need to create an environment as well where our workforce is agile. I know that Councillor West has done a lot of work with the volunteers, and staff who have acted as volunteers as well over the last number of months. And the reason that we've been so good in Derby has been because of the agility that we've demonstrated. But what we now have to do is make that agility the norm. And I'll kind of explain that a little bit more as to what I'm hoping will happen. Now, the final bullet point on there is one of the things that I'm advocating along with my colleagues that are working on this is we really do have to be brave. We have to empower people to rip up the old rule book. And before anybody panics, that does not mean breaching financial regulations or anything like that, but it means taking a step back and thinking about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and actually, should we be doing it? Oh goodness me, I don't know what's happening here. Well, here we are, we'll click them all at once. Derby's work streams. Again, I just want to make you familiar with terms that you may hear. Some of your colleagues may be involved in some working groups. Indeed, some of you might be involved in some of these work streams. But a key strand of community recovery centres on the community strand. And the hashtag Better Together is something that we are going to promote far and wide to facilitate better problem solving and hopefully reducing demand for services and social care going forward. Obviously, the other two work streams, economic, yes, that is all around the pounds, both in terms of what we spend, but also the pounds in the pocket of Derby. It's about business investment, and it's about the financial hits that Derby has taken through COVID. Organisational there in the middle is all about how we organise ourselves going forwards. But the strand that I'm most involved with is around our communities. But those three work streams will become more familiar as we move forward. I'm not going to dwell on this one because time is moving on, but this is what we are trying to achieve. We're trying to get to a point working with people in our communities so we can get the absolute maximum amount of things being dealt with at the top. In either tranche one, what we can all do for ourselves, tranche two, what we could do if a family member, a friend or a neighbour helped. If that's not a goer, what could be done through connection to a community group, and a big one on that is social isolation. There are lots of people who would just benefit from that. And then as we get through towards well, it's kind of the bottom of this, but would be the top if it was a pyramid, funneling through to the absolute areas where professional or service input is needed. And that is called funneling our services to those that most need it, rather than simply saying yes right at the top, which is something that's happened previously. And that's just another way of drawing that. Now, I think you've all got copies of this, so I'm not going to go through that one. So the locality model, just kind of summarising, it is about providing a platform for people to play on. or providing a pitch for people to play on. And the role of the local authority, we believe, is to create that platform, not to do it all ourselves, but to support it and enable it. And you can see there the key players that we have identified. And I hope you're pleased that you are up there in the top line. You might say, no, Maria, we don't want to be in the top row, but certainly we do think it's really important. It is going to involve a fundamental shift in approach. And tomorrow, I'm going to start some conversations with my colleagues in neighbourhoods in the council, because they are a team of staff that know neighbourhoods and have been working in this way for a long time. And they, I hope, will become a real key partner in how we can enhance the work that we're doing, enabling everybody to work together. So, this is just a short illustration of how we think it can work. The localities platform gets created in the middle. Obviously, the key players being Derby City Council and Derby Homes, which you'll stop hearing me refer to as two separate organisations. We are one. The community action and the voluntary sector, another key partner. Good neighbours schemes, families and friends, and then key statutory organisations, and of course the business sector. That is what we think we envisage as being conversations for phase one to start moving to a better way of working. Much simplified, but I didn't want to keep you all night. What I wanted to do was just give you an introduction and a flavour. I know that some of you have already done some work with the Food for Thought platform. Again, it's exactly the same principle. Food for Thought platform there in the middle. Community development team and other partners. Really important delivery vehicles through the Food Alliance, the Faith Sector and Community Action Derby. Pre-existing individuals and organisations, and then of course the retailers, corporate sponsorship and the such like that has helped us have such a success within our Food for Thought platform. So that is the end of the slides. It's a real whistle-stop tour. The reason I wanted to get it onto your agenda more than anything else, as I said, is to give you an opportunity to challenge me, or to give you the opportunity to really just, I guess, be more familiar with some of the terms that I think are going to be being used more regularly from now on. So that's me done, Chair.
Thank you very much, Maria. Very enlightening. Can I ask, are there any councillors who have any questions or comments they'd like to make?
I have a question, Chair.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Maria. I thought it was a really interesting presentation. My question is, and please don't take this personally, why has it come to regeneration and housing scrutiny? And I ask this because a couple of years ago, when I was asking for things to come to this board, I was told they weren't relevant to this board, even though they were regeneration projects. So I'm just confused, because our remit is to scrutinise regeneration and housing topics. I'm struggling to see where this fits under regeneration and housing, and therefore what the remit of this board is.
Right, let me try and answer that, Councillor. The same presentation is also going to communities later this week, and Rachel North is delivering that. Reason number one that it's coming here is our communities are front and central to regen and housing. Regen and housing covers so much. You don't have housing without a community, and you don't have regen without communities. So for fear of getting myself into terrible trouble, Councillor West, I would agree with you that these sorts of issues have always had a relevance. Maybe it's the focus now that the pandemic has placed on the importance of working with our communities that people are starting to see the links and the silos are getting broken down. I mean, the locality work that I really hope Derby can stand up and be proud of 12, 18 months, 2 years from now is something that we're only going to achieve if all councillors across the whole city buy into it. So I'm sure if I get my way, and I'm sure if Rachel North gets her way, we will be talking to all scrutiny boards about the importance of supporting our communities.
Thank you, Maria. Absolutely, silos do need to be broken down, and this has been a problem for such a long time. I mean, that was going to be my next question, was that why isn't this being presented across the board to all councillors? And I don't know whether that's a recommendation that we can make, actually, Chair, because it's brilliant that it's going to communities. But I mean, it's relevant to the, I'm trying to think what the other ones are. There's an adults one, there's a CYP one. I'm sure Karen will step up and tell me what the others are that I'm missing. But I would have thought, again, to break down those silos even further, that this is something that needs to be considered by all councillors and definitely be seen by all councillors, even if that's just the presentation being shared with them all. So I don't know, Chair, whether that's sort of a recommendation we can make, or whether we need to make, or whether we can just ask for it to be shared.
Why not? I agree, Councillor West. Information like this is across the board, really. It's relevant to all the aspects of the City Council. Some more so than others, granted, but yeah, let's do that.
If I may, Chair, I think that the most important thing is if we could come away from this scrutiny meeting tonight with a recommendation for a communication plan across all members, so that we're delivering one clear message, because my concern is change of this scale, and I do think there is quite a scale of change that could well be on the table. Goodness me, I mean, the thought of throwing away your lanyard, and actually it doesn't matter who you work for because it's our community that we should be bothered with, not what lanyard we wear. I mean, that is pretty big stuff. It's radical. I think that we need to get one message across. We need to get some clear thoughts out there. We need to dispel the myths and rumours that will circulate if we don't do it. So if I was going to ask the group to do anything, that would be my recommendation, that officers are asked to go away and come up with a communications plan for all members.
Okay. Does anybody object to that? I think it's a good idea. Communication's the key, really.
Always is, Chair. No, I don't disagree with that at all.
Great. Okay, well, that's definitely a recommendation then. I've got a couple of questions, Maria, about this. Relatively new to this, Jane. Where's it originated from, the concept of this? Who's the driving force or the driving forces behind it, really?
Yeah, there's been a couple of other areas in the country where pre-COVID they were brave enough to step out of the traditional mould and do that. But within Derby, Rachel North has brought the idea in. She's been involved in previous employment, but Rachel is the driving force in Derby.
Okay, I do like the idea of empowerment for all, because all too often with councils, people have become reluctant. They talk to us as councillors sometimes, though, it's the council's problem. It's always somebody else. People don't want to always take responsibility to do little things. And if we're empowered to behave like that and gradually and change over to that, I can see it. I can see much bigger, wider benefits from it. I really can. Yeah. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
I mean, the one thing I would add is I think there's lots of mistakes to be made as well. This really will be, it'll be a project that grows. And I think the thing is we have to all accept that there are some things that we may try, but there might not be things that we repeat.
That's true. Yeah.
So it's kind of work in progress.
Yeah.
The key issue is that we need now to maintain those amazing partnerships that have been developed across the sectors, because it would absolutely, it would be criminal to lose what we've achieved over the last 9 months.
It would, yeah. And then my last question, which is a bit obtuse. Hopefully it's not driven by anything linked or related to common purpose. And if you don't know the answer to that, I'd appreciate it if you do find out. You know, people who've been common purpose trained or whatever. So I'm very sceptical about that. Thank you.
Chair, like you, I'm sceptical too. And to the best of my knowledge, no, I don't believe it is.
Great, thank you. Okay, we've got next chair before. Oh, I thought Joanna was typing. Maybe she may want to speak. Do you have anything else to say on the subject, Councillor West, or any other councillor?
No, thank you, Councillor Evans. Just to say thank you to Maria for her time, as always.
All right.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria. Very enlightening presentation it was.
I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Item 8, provision of additional affordable housing in Derby. Will you be leading this, Paul?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We're going to tag team this, Sean, Ian and I. So no silo working between planning, housing and Derby Homes. I have a series of notes for you, which we will circulate to you tomorrow. You'll have them in your inbox tomorrow. The question came across to planning, could the threshold of affordable housing be reduced? And as many of you are on the planning committee, you'll recall, hopefully, that the threshold on affordable housing is set in our local plan. It's the city's local plan, and that sets it at a development of 15 units or more is required to provide affordable housing. Now, we aim for 30% affordable housing on those schemes of 15 units or more, and coincidentally, last Friday, we sent out the planning obligation supplementary planning document, which you'll have all read over the weekend, I'm sure, which I would urge you to review, which indicates in there how we deal with Section 106 and how Section 106 delivers affordable housing and what else Section 106 delivers. So it's not just affordable housing, it's all the other impacts that go along to seek to mitigate the impact of the development. So the local plan looks at any development scheme over 15 units to provide affordable housing. Allied to that, recently, last year, towards the end of last year, the government had their white paper and their thoughts on how to change the problems with the current planning system. And the government in there were proposing to increase the threshold from 15 units in our case to 40 or 50. So you could actually have a scheme which develops 40 or 50 units and have 39 or 49 units and have no affordable housing, which is the wrong way. And kind of that's what we said to them. They were looking to do that to increase the amount of housing, general housing, to meet the general housing requirement, and they were suggesting that would be done over an 18-month period. We still don't know the outcome of their consultation and the white paper, so we wait with bated breath. Now, the issue of lowering the threshold, which is the question I was asked, It's been raised many times, and we've always been the belief that lowering the threshold to 10 units, and that's the limit in the planning policy framework, the national guidance is you shouldn't go down to less than 10, wouldn't actually increase the number of on-site affordable units. Now, the reason for this is that whenever you set a threshold, a developer will sneak in under it. So if we set the threshold at 10 units, you'll get a lot of schemes coming in with 9, because then they don't have to provide affordable housing. Currently, we see a lot of schemes with 14 units because they don't have to provide, because 15 is the trigger. Equally, the affordable units go to registered providers to look after them, and they're not keen on taking a small number of units. They would rather have them on larger concentrations on a larger site. So there are unintended consequences of lowering that threshold. There's also viability issues as well. We feel that we've pitched it about right with 15. And the next question I was asked was, could the contribution in lieu be provided to allow the council to pool the money to build affordable homes? The local plan and our 106 supplementary planning document does allow for financial contributions to be secured in lieu of on-site affordable housing only in exceptional circumstances. This is usually where on-site provision is not practical or desirable from a registered provider's perspective. It's perhaps those who are going to operate the units. In the past, we found it difficult to spend those contributions when we've had the money, because actually it's an issue of delivery of the housing, not necessarily the cash it's having suitable sites available. So from a planning point of view, it's also more desirable to have the affordable housing on site as part of a mixed, sustainable, balanced community, as opposed to creating what effectively would be affordable housing ghettos, or having large swathes of purely market housing with no affordable housing within it. So it's back to the traditional. I dealt with the housing schemes down at Chellaston in West Chellaston, and they're pepper potted with affordable units rather than having them all in one place. Yeah. Those were the two areas that I was asked to tackle. I don't know whether Sean or Ian want to come in on after me.
Yeah, so if I may, Chair, as Paul was saying, we're going to do the second part of the tag team, and it comes to something, doesn't it, when I'm a rose between the thorns of Paul and Sean, so I'm sorry, I do apologise about that, but hopefully as I'm waffling, something is beginning to load up, Chair. Is that happening? Or I'm getting a message.
It's loading up now. I can see it.
That's wonderful. So I'll continue to waffle, and then hopefully when that comes up on your screens, you'll let me know. The second part was we were asked, well, what is the council and what are Derby Homes doing to? How's that? Is that got it?
That's smashing.
Thank you, Dominic. That's fantastic. So we were asked, well, what are the council, what are Derby Homes doing to provide more affordable housing in the city? So I'm going to start off with some slides about predominantly what the council are doing in partnership with housing associations, and then Sean will finish off talking more specifically about what Derby Homes are doing to provide affordable housing, and as has been much of the theme of some of the other presentations tonight, it's very much we're working very closely in partnership with Derby Homes to get more affordable housing built in the city. So I thought, just to start off with, it would be useful if we're all clear what we actually mean by affordable housing. Homes England have given us a definition there. I won't read that out, but I have just put a number of bullet points up there to just go through some of the different types of
affordable housing. The first is target rent, and really what that will mean to yourselves as much as me is it's council rent. So it's target rent is essentially the council rent, the rent that we charge for our council houses, and pretty much within the city, as you can imagine, that's pretty much the cheapest rent in the city. There's this new term, or newish now, affordable rent that the government have introduced for councils and housing associations, and that rent shouldn't be any more than the market rent. So if a privately rented 2 or 3 bed house was rented at a price of £100, the affordable rental cost couldn't be any more than 80 quid. In the southeast, in London, affordable rents are normally much higher than the council target rent because the private rents are so much higher down there. In Derby, to be honest, it doesn't make much difference. And indeed, because with affordable rent you can include service charges, sometimes the affordable rent can be exactly the same as the council rent. Other types of affordable housing you'll be familiar with, so shared ownership, that gets tinkered with. The government are looking at the definition at the moment for shared ownership. They're out to consultation on that, but essentially the concept is one whereby a home owner buys a proportion, anywhere between 25 and 90% of a home, and the remaining share is owned by the public sector, whether that's a council or a housing association. And then there's been a myriad of different low-cost home ownership models over the last decade or more, and successive governments have tinkered with the schemes that are on offer. The current scheme just coming out now is First Homes, where developers are having to sell homes at least a 30% discount from the market price. But all of the low-cost home ownership schemes have all been essentially around the idea of making homes more affordable, either for first-time buyers, such as with this First Home one, or indeed to anybody, just making them cheaper to own. Okay, so who provides affordable housing? The council does, Derby Homes does, and housing associations do. We haven't tried to list them all there. There's probably, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 housing associations that are actively developing in the city at any one time, and then there's a greater number that are managing council social housing stock in the city. So how are we doing in terms of delivery of affordable housing? And we've just put up the last few years there to give you a feel, and obviously the bottom line is the important one, and you can see that last year was a really significant increase in the amount of affordable housing provided, and this year it's obviously still a predictive figure because we haven't got there yet, but we anticipate doing it even better in terms of the numbers of affordable housing. The second row down is the Section 106 that Paul mentioned. Those units are generally provided by housing associations operating in the city, and all the other rows are provided by Derby Homes and the council. And the reason why we generally allow housing association to pick up the Section 106 sites is that they are subsidised by the developer, and therefore they stack up most easily in terms of financial viability. Our approach at the council and with Derby Homes is that we want to tackle the hardest sites, the sites that no one else will pick up, and certainly Derby Homes' mission is to do that. So Derby Homes will pick up and develop very small sites that even housing associations wouldn't normally do because they wouldn't be financially viable to do it. But our view is that the housing associations will pick up the Section 106 sites, but if we don't do these small sites, nobody else will. And so that's a deliberate strategy to do that. But as I said, it's looking very positive, the outputs last year, this year. The one for 21-22 that will inevitably get higher. Whether it will get up to 230 again, I don't know, probably not quite, but I think it will be around about the 2019-20 figure. The reason why it's not showing that at the minute is, as we come on to in a minute, we do benefit through a lot of windfall sites, the sites that just come out of the woodwork that developers, contractors, landowners just bring to us at fairly short notice, and we can buy them off the open market at short notice. And so that 21-22 figure will inevitably increase as we get towards the end of that financial year. Okay, so I mentioned Section 106 is, you can see there was a big increase in the amount of affordable housing that housing associations could provide in the city between 1819 and 1920. That was because the market had a bit of a lift. It was in part a coincidence that a number of sites came forward at that point, but nevertheless very welcome that we got such an increase in Section 106 affordable houses. So you can see there's a large amount of affordable houses are provided by housing associations, but you'll all be aware of the housing revenue account. It's the council's ring-fenced account for managing, maintaining and building new council houses. And as I said earlier, both ourselves and Derby Homes work really closely together in the delivery of new homes. But it's even within the housing revenue account, it's not just about the council and Derby Homes. And Derby Homes, in fact, in this instance, are working in close partnership with the War Memorial Village Trust, and Derby Homes are building a number of homes for the War Memorial Trust, and they're really, by Derby standards, they're really groundbreaking homes in terms of the thermal efficiency that they're achieving. I'm sure if you're interested in those, Sean will be pleased to answer questions about those homes that his teams are currently delivering on behalf of the War Memorial Village Trust at this moment. We also build new houses ourselves. So on most schemes, Derby Homes will build the homes for the council. If it's on a much larger scheme, something like Parklands View Extra Care Scheme, where you're talking of 80 or so units, Derby Homes are very much aware of where their expertise and scale stops. And so if we're talking of schemes of that size or schemes that are of a particular specialist nature, then it will be the council, my own teams, Karen Brearley, who's on the call tonight, her teams will commission contractors to build those very large or specialist schemes. But as I mentioned earlier, we benefit from a lot of sites just coming forward. So particularly when the market slumps a bit, developers, contractors, house builders will come to us and say, we've got X amount of houses, are you interested in buying them? And in fact, bizarrely, some of our best years in terms of the provision of affordable housing was just after the last housing slump. So 2010, 2011, 2012, there were a lot of the big house builders who caught a very bad cold. They had low confidence in selling the homes they were already had in construction. And so they approached us and we could buy up a lot of those homes at good prices. We also acquire affordable homes individually, so we will go out there and we'll buy houses on the open market just like any one of us sitting here would. And we've done, I don't know, there's a chart a bit further on, I think will show us probably about 25 or so this year. I think we predict we're going to buy about 40 of those next year. And then finally, we build on the council surplus sites. We've done a number of those schemes in the past. Sean might touch on a site at Grange Avenue where he's building quite a big scheme of bungalows. And we hope shortly to transfer quite a large number of council sites into the HRA so that we can build more affordable housing. That graph just shows the benefits that the the HRA has in terms of delivering affordable housing within the overall number. So you can see we are building just over 100, and in fact our current business plan is saying we're going to build 125 or so houses going forward. That's building and acquiring. And that's against a total figure, as I was saying earlier, it was around about 236 last year. So what we're doing is significant, it's important, but it goes back to the earlier point that, you know, we can't do this in isolation ourselves and Derby Homes. We need to work very much with our housing association partners because they are still delivering the lion's share of affordable housing in the city. Now, you might be aware that under the government's new rules, we have to spend a certain amount of the right to buy receipts that we get in every year. So in previous years, we've been selling around about 150, 160 homes every year through the right to buy. The council obviously are obliged to sell those homes. It can't prevent that. However, those homes do deliver quite a significant capital receipt every year, and we've reached an agreement along with a number of other councils whereby we can retain the majority of those receipts as long as we can demonstrate to the government that within 3 years we've spent them on new affordable housing. And this graph just shows that it's been really tight actually in years gone by as to whether we're going to have to hand money back to the government or not. If we don't spend the receipts within 3 years, it goes back to the government. It's been really tight up until now as to whether we'd have to hand it back. But I think at the end of this financial year, as the lines show, the blue line and then the green line above it show that we are increasingly moving out of the danger of having to hand money back to the government. And that just reflects that we're investing more and more money in new affordable homes and getting ahead of the target that the government has set us, which is represented by the red line. Okay. And that's been an important switch as well. I was saying in 2019-20 we built nearly getting on for 240 homes. That's ourselves and housing associations, and that was the first year that you can see the blue bars there comfortably exceeded the orange bars. The orange bars shows those that we're selling every year through the right to buy, and so year after year up until 1920 we were having to sell more affordable houses than were being built in the city. Last year was the first year that we actually built and acquired more homes than we had to sell. So quite an important turning point for us in the city, and we're confident that from this point onwards we should be able to continue to be building and acquiring more homes than we're actually selling. And just then a bit of a flavour of some of the other sites that are coming up in terms of what we're building. Sites at Barlow Street just to the southern edge of the DRI or the former DRI site, and then other small infill sites at Cummins and Oaklands Avenue out in Littleover. We've got a number of other schemes in the design stage, not least the Ada Bliss site down by the river in Chester Green. And I mentioned earlier that we're hoping to get other council sites moved across to the HRA, and as part of that we will be looking at the opportunity to deliver an extra care scheme, so a second extra care scheme that will be council owned, managed by Derby Homes in the city, and then we will continue taking forward other council surplus sites, whether they be fairly significant in size or whether they're just tiny infill sites of a plot for one or two units. So that was a fairly rapid whistle-stop tour of what I wanted to say, and I'll hand over to Sean to take us through. And Sean, we're back to the old days. You'll have to shout me when you want to me to move on slides. Is that okay?
We'll do, Ian. Yeah, thanks very much for helping steer this through. Good evening, everyone. So the Derby Homes perspective, and Ian's right in pointing out, how closely the two teams work together, and we combined that resource and that expertise to provide as many new affordable homes as we're able to within the city. Now, I'm also really pleased that Ian's mentioned the project that we're working on for the Warm Oil Village, because that's a project that I'm particularly excited about. And if we weren't going through the current COVID lockdown arrangement, we're making a real song and dance about completing those 9 homes there. And to be fair, you've got to tip your hat to the Warm Oil Village Trust. They really are showing us a glimpse of what future homes could look like there. So the 9 bungalows there have got heaps of insulation in the floor and the walls and the loft space. They've got triple glazing. They've got underfloor heating that's powered by an air source heat pump that converts 1 unit of energy into 4 units of heat. They've got solar photovoltaic panels on the roof, and they really are a glimpse of how housing is going to look moving forward. So I think that sets the template a little for us and challenges us to make sure that we continue to lead by example as a local authority. Now at Derby Homes, we've got an in-house model where we've been working on some of these small scratchy sites. It's come with a lot of pain and anguish, but we've managed to, over the last 5 or 6 years, reach a point where we're about to complete our 100th new home. Now that might not sound like many, but that's across 16 sites that have been really tricky to work on, sites that Ian's already mentioned no one else would probably be interested in or would be able to get the viability to work. I mean, who on this earth would want to build a pair of semis on Peel Street next to a boozer when it was open as well? We managed to keep the workforce out of there, and add to that the fact that you had to use piling for the foundation. So we are working on some very tricky sites, but they're making a difference. To get to that 100th home, you can see the difference. You drive around the city and see some of the properties that we've built. This time of year, around Christmas time, with the decorations in the window and the new curtains up, and families making a real home of them. It's great to see that. So we developed these sites through the in-house new build model. We don't employ armies of bricklayers. We don't even own a JCB. What we do though is use small local contractors that we've built relationships with over the years to help provide those parts of the service. So effectively, Derby Homes are occupying the space that a building contractor might do, an external building contractor, and tapping into those local resources that are available to help us deliver there. We use our own resources and our own trades where it works for us. So we're good at fitting kitchens and bathrooms and finishing things off, but those local firms, an integral part of what we do, and it keeps the economy moving within the city. And it's local homes, built by local people for local people. It also gives me the added benefit of being able to diversify into new build. Not only to give our existing workforce, so for years and years have spent their time mostly on repairs, the chance to try something different and get involved on the new build side, but it's also fantastic as an opportunity for our apprentices. Our apprentices don't end up just being an apprentice in maintenance work. They're able to sample the whole gambit of what's available in terms of their trade, and they always enjoy spending their time on the new build sites. We also incorporate fire safety sprinklers into all homes. We've done that for a long time now. That's something that we don't even question. So the standard of what we build, we think, is really good. But also importantly, as Ian's already referred to, we understand our own capacity. We're not trying to run before we've learned to walk. And we've been doing this for a while now, but we understand, that there are larger, more complex sites where it just works, especially from a health and safety point of view and a site management point of view, to bring in experts that are good at delivering sites of those scales. We can handle probably at any one time, maybe 4 or 5 sites. We've got to make sure that we've got a site manager on site and that we've got all of the health and safety angles covered. So on to the next slide, please, Ian. I think I might be diving straight onto a photograph. 2 properties at Hastings Street. They just ooze quality, don't they? Don't look at the fact that there's a fence panel missed. This was just before they were finished. A picture of the rear elevation. So 2 properties there on Hastings Street. Councillor Russell may remember a few years ago helping when we celebrated the completion of those 2. They're the very first 2 homes that were built through the Derby Homes in-house model. I think they've both been sold through Right to Buy now, actually. So they must be good if people did want to buy them. Although the cost will help protect any loss of income. So, we're able to recycle that money and build more. The next slide, please, Ian, just gives you an idea of the different types of homes that we've been building as well. So you can see 3, but we built 4 bungalows there on Thanet Drive, and that seems an age ago now. And I do remember some of the issues that we had to tackle in terms of that green area being very popular with dog walkers. And, we worked very closely with Paul's team in planning to deal with those issues sensitively, reassure people that we're going to deal with any boundary issues, and most people are really happy with the solution there. You'll notice the chimneys on the bungalows there. We're not fitting coal fires anymore. They're fiberglass chimneys that are positioned there to make sure that those properties are in keeping with the neighbouring properties. You can see a chimney pot just in the distance there by the tree on the existing home there. So that's to make sure that everything blends in. And we always try where we can to build properties that will stand the test of time from an aesthetic point of view as well. You can see the banding of blues around there, just to give them that little bit of a standout feature, that we'll be proud to walk past those for the next few years. On to the next one, Ian. I think this gives you a glimpse of what we're looking to do in the future. Ian's already mentioned Barlow Street. Here's the artist's impression of what we're planning to build there. We're currently working closely with Paul's team to get this site through the planning process, and this will be a much needed family hostel unit where 12 families, rather than going into bed and breakfast accommodation, are going to be able to, on a temporary basis, live in an amazing building like that with some dignity, and that's going to provide a real resource that I know that Claire Mabani, our Director of Housing, is very, very keen to see completed. And we'll bring in an external contractor to help with that. That's a fairly complex project there, but again, our specification is that will be close to the spec that you can see on the War Memorial Village, with air source heat pump for heating, lots of insulation, and there'll be solar PVs that you can't see on the image there, but I guarantee they will be on the roof there. So that's a flavour of some of the things that we do. We want to carry on doing this and delivering more and more. On to the next one, and I think this kind of rounds things off a little, really. This is kind of for all of us in a way. So going forward, Ian's already mentioned councillors, the surplus sites that the council are looking at. Great relationship with the estates team, who are identifying quite a raft of sites now that we can look at and identify for affordable housing. And what I would say is every site we build out, every single home's affordable. We're not looking at anything other than that. So we need to push for more of these sites to come through, and we're working on that, and that is happening now, and get those through, agree what we're going to build, get the planning permissions in place, and get moving with that through either the in-house new build model, or if it needs to be, using external contractors to do that. But that's probably not going to be enough on its own. That helps provide some good numbers, but I think we also need to look at securing private land for new build. And I suppose the AWS is a really good example of that. We used HRA funding to pick up a private site there that could provide, many new affordable homes. There are other sites that we're currently considering as well, to make sure that we've got the land to be able to build what the city really needs, and that's probably been the biggest challenge really over the last few years, identifying land that's big enough to build more than a pair or more than 4, something that's going to really make a difference. Ian mentioned Grange Avenue. I can't wait to get stuck into that, where we're building up to 40 bungalows. That really has an impact in terms of boosting the numbers. When we think back, if we think back to the late 40s, early 50s, we've got councillors that are in your position in those days, buying hundreds of acres of land that became Mackworth and Alveston and Chad Park. If we think back to our ancestors, they were building at one point 2,500 to 3,000 council houses a year in the city. Amazing stuff, really. And if we can get anywhere near that, conditions are different now, but with the ambition, we need to be trying to aim at least to get some way towards that. And of course, I've mentioned climate change and zero carbon. That's one thing that we need to be making sure we push for anyway. There's a target for all homes to be carbon zero by 2050. I actually think that target's going to end up being brought forward, and we're looking to see what we need to do to retrofit the existing stock. That's another project that we're working closely with the council on. So exemplar schemes that have enhanced design, that's probably the War Memorial Village at this stage. And we should be trailblazing. We should be leading by example. I think that's something that we need to make sure that we're focusing on. Alongside that, we should be looking at modern methods of construction as well. Derby as a city, embraced modern methods of construction and have done so probably for about the last 100 years. People may recall, the cast iron properties that we've got on Elton Road and around the Spider Island. They've stood the test of time. They're almost 100 years old old now. I think they were sold to us in the mid-1920s as being rodent-proof. That was important in those days. But they're still standing, and we've got many other examples of non-traditional properties, that have stood the test of time. Some have needed a bit of care and attention and a bit of repair work, but if you want to build fast and you want to not disrupt the local community, it's useful to see that market develop, and useful to see more options come through that route, that we've got confidence in building homes more quickly, but most importantly also have the confidence that they're going to stand the test of time and provide the sort of quality that we're looking for as well. We're also looking to identify sites for more extra care. Parkland View is an amazing development, an award-winning development even, Ian, I should say, and more of that is needed. So you are looking for large-scale sites to be able to do that, and it can be tricky. And also continuing to support the corporate aims of the council that really seem to be very fizzy at the moment in terms of making sure that we're all working together to achieve those. I think that probably concludes our joint presentation, guys. So thank you to Ian and Paul for being the precursor to this whole lot and helping with us getting to where we are. And that's a thank you there from us all, I think, guys. I hope that was okay.
You're on chair mute. Chair, you're on mute. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I put it on mute earlier. My phone was beeping. Excuse me. Yeah, thank you very much to all three of you, really, for a whistle-stop tour. Such an expansive one as well. I mean, there's so much information available there, all positive, and the direction's great. This is so forward-thinking for Derby. I'm impressed, I have to say. Does any councillor want to comment or have any questions?
I'd like to, Chair, please.
Please go ahead, Councillor West.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, guys, because I appreciate that this is largely in response to a lot of questions that I threw out at all of you and others last year as part of our topic review. And I really appreciate the work that has gone on behind the scenes to provide us with some answers and some updates tonight. I'm going to go backwards, actually. Sorry, Paul. But Sean, it's fantastic to hear some of the things that you've just been saying, and also the passion that you've delivered that with. I think that was very, very evident to see. It's really exciting to see the developments at the War Memorial Village. It's absolutely something that I've been talking about to anyone that will listen for a number of years, that affordable housing isn't just about the cost of the rent, it's about the on costs and the bills. So the developments and the changes that you're making there will really have a huge impact. A question, I guess, for you and for Ian, because I'm not sure quite where it would fall, but talking about sites, I'm obviously going to ask about the Rolls-Royce main work site. We were due to have a meeting on Wednesday, which has been put back a couple of weeks. Keeps being put back, but I don't know whether you know anything about the site, not the main works, the site at the bottom of Nightingale Road to come available, if you've got any update. And Paul, I absolutely appreciate the issues that you've raised, and we know full well that developers will try and fudge their way around things if they possibly can, sadly. But the question for you is, what can we do? Because this has all come up as a topic review question. It's all come up with an aim to increase affordable housing within the city. So I apologise for batting it back, but what can we do is the biggest question I have of the night.
Through you, Chair, if I come in on that one.
Sure, please do.
Actually, before I do, can I just say how, without prejudging the Barlow Street, how good does that look? The Barlow Street scheme, without taking anything away from members voting at committee if it gets that far, but it looks really good. Affordable housing, we push, as you know, we push developers when they say, yeah, we can't afford it. We say, okay, show us your books, we'll take it through the district valuer, and the district valuer scrutinises to the nth degree exactly what can we squeeze out of them. Now, 4 or 5 years ago, the developer would say, well, we paid this amount for the site. Government caught on to that because the money, the viability, the money that was left to be able to gain anything out of the scheme had gone to the landowner Developer pays too much, therefore developer has very little left to build his houses and contribute to his mitigation. Government said, okay, don't take into account, Mr. District Valuer, the land value they paid for it. Just tell us what they should have paid for it and what they can then give back to mitigate the impact of the development. It worked well for a couple of months until sites weren't coming forward because the landowner wasn't selling the land because he wasn't getting what he wanted for the land. So it backfired. So we have an awful lot of sites, as you know, around Derby that are fields that are allocated for housing, haven't come forward. And they're stalled in the planning process, albeit it's the developer and the landowner not necessarily agreeing the price. What can we do? We screw the developers down as much as we can to get out of them the mitigation for the impact of their development, and that's a lot of things, not only affordable housing. Affordable housing's top of the list, but there's also education, health facilities, the infrastructure. Interestingly, I have a meeting coming up with homes communities, CLG, from the government, and they want to know what can they do to help us deliver more housing. Well, the simple answer is you could give us some money like a regeneration fund to help bring sites forward, to help us provide the school, and then the developer pays us back, so that then the developer's got more money to provide affordable housing and other facilities. We actually do it in partnership with them, as opposed to the developer doing everything, because the cost up front of doing, I don't know, all the highway works and the school up front and everything else, he shells out a lot of money and doesn't have anything left until he's sold houses. So, sorry, long answer. Loads of ideas. I think we need a fund of money to be able to assist, but get back. Developer pays us back, and then we move that fund onto the next site, and so we relieve the pressure. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
It does, Paul, and I never expect a short answer from you.
Ian, I'm not sure whether you're best placed to update on the Rolls-Royce project and the site at the bottom end. I'm a bit out of the loop on it, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. As I understand it, on that site, we are going to propose to the developer that actually the council takes on acquiring the bungalows that were involved in the site rather than Derby Homes, and it just it makes sense. I was mentioning earlier about the pressure that we are under to spend the right to buy receipts. If the council buys those bungalows, that spend all contributes towards easing that right to buy pressure. And so it makes sense to do that rather than Derby Homes Limited buying them under their own name, because unfortunately under the current government rules, when Derby Homes Limited spend money under their own name, that doesn't currently count towards right to buy spend. In terms of the overall progress, Councillor West, I because we've only just recently coming back in on the site, I'm not up to speed. And I have got my colleague Karen Brearley, who I know fell off the call, but he's back on now. Karen Brearley, if I may, Chair, have you got any update on the Osmaston site?
Hi. We've actually had we were going to have a meeting later on this month, but it's now just been rearranged for early February. So we'll actually have a better idea then. But as Ian says, with the grant rates and everything, that they were just too low for Derby Homes Limited to take on those properties. So yeah, unfortunately, no update other than we've got a meeting coming up shortly.
Okay.
That's fine, thank you, appreciate it. I just thought I'd ask while you were on the call. But yeah, again, thank you for the work that's gone on behind the scenes for all of this. Really do appreciate it. And obviously, it doesn't stop there. It is something that was of great importance to this committee. So I'd like to hope that we'll keep taking this forward.
Thank you, Councillor West. Yeah, I'd just like to say a few comments. I noticed, Sean, most of those photographs, there's one item in there that I particularly like. This is probably a personal thing. Porches, not closed in. The number of times people close porches in, and you need to stand out of the rain to put your key in your door with your shopping bags. It sounds basic, but I noticed the properties all had porches or coverings.
Most of ours. They're open as well.
Yeah, very good.
From a security point of view as well. Councillor Evans, you're not kind of kind of closed in, and from a house safety point of view, I think.
Yeah, and then going back to what you also said about the post-war massive housing scheme, Mackworth and Ulverston and so on. I mean, my previous boss was doing electrical work on those properties, and it was on a huge scale and across the country as well. And they did build to a good standard. I know there's one or two inherent problems on some of these properties, but generally they were built to a high standard. But I suppose the difference then, they weren't wrapped up in bureaucracy and legislation like we are today. And for me, the more we can discharge some of that and get back to basics in a clean, safe, carbon efficient manner, obviously, then the better, really. Yeah, it's all good stuff. This really good, and I commend you and your team and all involved. Really, it's really good.
Great, thank you.
Any other? Oh, Jerry.
Please, Chair. Yeah.
Sorry, Jerry. Please excuse me, Councillor Peer.
No problem at all. No problem at all. No problem at all. I like being informal. I do. Just a quick question for Sean, if I may. Sean, when I was on the Derby Homes Board, we went through. There was a list of jobs that had been started, jobs that were in for planning. Then you'd got the planning for them, and then it was just like a progress report. Yeah. Is there any chance you could update councillors with that, either a full list that's going on throughout the city, or one per ward, or anything like that, whatever makes it easy for yourself?
Absolutely.
I get a lot of questions from residents. I know there's one on Chesapeake where where we've knocked down the community centre, and there's some new ones going up there, and I'm getting asked, when's the new build starting?
What I'll ask the team to do, Councillor Pearce, rather than send the whole spreadsheet out to every councillor, is just to kind of slice it up per ward.
Yeah,
and
that's fine.
Give each councillor the update on the projects that are there, and we'll commit to carrying on updating them as we progress through those.
Yeah, that'll be spot on. That one, brilliant, lovely.
We know how important it is to engage with members.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great idea, Jerry. Very good. Any other questions, councillors?
Can I just ask a really brief one, please, Chair?
You certainly can, Councillor Russell. Go ahead.
Thank you. It's for Ian. Ian, in that presentation, you showed us a graph which talked about the right to buy receipts versus the amount of affordable houses being built, and the jump from, I think it was 1819 to 1920. I'm not sure which year it was. What triggered that? What was the turning point? How did we just suddenly start building loads more versus the year before? And is there a reason, or?
Yeah, it was several things. One of the big increases was the amount of Section 106 sites coming through. So very much Paul's team working with ourselves and housing associations and developers, as he said, to get those bigger sites to deliver Section 106 affordable housings. But also, one thing that I haven't mentioned so far is that just towards the end of that time, the debt cap, the HOA debt cap has been lifted, which means that we can suddenly borrow a lot more money. Yeah, and that will take time to feed through properly until we feel the full effect. But that will have had an impact, and our ambitions have been sort of lifted from that point. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Yeah, that's cleared it up. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, anybody? Is that all? And we don't have any recommendations, only a big thank you. Okay, that concludes item 8. Let's move on to item 9 then. Remit, work, programme and topic reviews. Okay, who's going to lead this?
Chair, I can lead this one if you wish.
Yep, sure. Please do, Karen.
In Appendix 1 of the report, you've got the list of items that you've considered so far and the up-and-coming items. So really,
yes.
it's just a case of having a look at that list to see if it's suitable for going forward and if there's anything else you want to add to it.
Okay, so if we go to the 16th of March then, and what we've got for that date at the moment proposed, transport option in the south of the city, which is the A500, A50 corridor, and a presentation on the work of the Midland Connect. And we've also got an update on the COVID impact on Derby. Nothing else is in for March, but we have got future meetings like climate change mitigation beyond CO2 emissions, OCOR, and A38 update. The motion from council was saying there. So does anybody else have any other suggestions as well we could include or want to include or do and look at? No?
Sorry, Chair, just unmuting. I suppose I'm not sure when the update on. Sorry, I'm looking at another screen. I'm not sure when the update on COVID impact on Derby was added to the work programme. I don't remember it from last month. And again, I'm just wanting to make sure, given that this is the last planned meeting of this committee for the year, that we consider the things that are absolutely pertinent to this committee, and whether an update on the COVID impact comes under that, or whether, as we've discussed in the previous item with Maria, that features somewhere else, because that obviously does impact on all the councillors and does have a relevance to all the councillors. The climate change mitigation beyond OCOR, I think we had updates from Werner and Andy previously, but maybe last year, or maybe I'm honestly forgetting, because I think because we had those meetings cancelled, I can't remember whether it was last year or this year that we've had them in. And the A38 update would look like it would be an interesting one for this committee to look at.
Yes.
So I mean, I suggest not bumping the update on the COVID impact, because obviously that's absolutely crucial that we get an update, but whether this is the best forum for that.
I agree, Councillor West. It's really the COVID impact is for across the board. It's not just specific to ourselves, is it? So, and the A38, yeah, a pertinent issue. I mean, we can always come. Are we in a position where, you know, and I'll open this up to the other councillors here, is we can, you know, if anybody has suggestions on reflection after this meeting, then email Karen or myself, and we could always look at putting them forward for the next agenda. You know, there might be something that springs to mind that's not immediately apparent. I don't know. You know, we could consider that. I don't see why not. Anybody else got any ideas or potential input? No? All right. Okay, it's good, Councillor West. So, can we conclude item 9 then? Yep, sure, okay. Now, I don't believe item 10, items referred from the Executive Scrutiny Board. Well, there isn't any. I've checked and there is none that's been referred. So that does conclude the meeting. All I can do is thank all the participants and for the presentations and the attendees.